Sure, you can always shop around for flooring, but in the end, it all leads back to the one place you probably should have started, the experts at Carpet One. Save yourself the time and the hassle and let Carpet One help you find the right product at the right price. Beautifully installed, guaranteed. Come see the One, Carpet One, on the Business Loop in Columbia.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Friday, December the 11th. Good to have you with us today. We're not going to talk about the holiday season today. We have Walter Bargen with us, who is our first Missouri Poet Laureate, but he's dressed out in holiday red.
Well, at least I have red on, yes. At least I have
Good to
red
have you
on.
here, Walter.
Yes, yes.
You're a wonderful poet, but today you wanted to talk about...
But, what do you mean,
But no. But today, of all things, you wanted to talk about snakes, because snakes have been in your life, haven't they?
Well, you know, I've lived in the outback of Boone County now for 40 years. And over 40 years, you can't help but have encounters with the wildlife around you.
Right.
One of which is a group called snakes.
Yeah.
And just to give you some sense of how often I've had encounters with snakes, one day I'm sitting on the sidewalk by my house, and my son, who is about 9 years old at that time, he's 41 now, is sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk reading a book. I'm in a lawn chair reading a book. Suddenly, his book goes flying in the air. He's screaming, and he runs off into the house and slams the door. And I'm sitting there mystified, and I keep shouting at him, "What's the problem? What's the problem?" And finally, I hear him say, "Look down at your feet." And I look down at my feet, and a foot from my bare feet is a copperhead.
Oh.
There goes my book flying off. There goes my chair going backwards, and I'm running into the house. But another time, my daughter opens the front door. She's maybe about 6 years old. She's going out, and she opens the screen door, and a 4-foot snake falls on her. She goes running out of the house screaming. The snake goes racing into the house. Into the house. And I have to spend the next half hour not knowing exactly what type of snake it is. I have an idea, but I'm not certain. And being very cautious, looking under things, moving furniture, and I finally find it behind a closet.
And what was it?
It was a black snake, but it was wedged in such a way that it was really hard to get a hold of because it kept striking at me. But I eventually got it, took it outside, and that was it.
The black snake was trying to bite you?
Yes.
But they're not poisonous?
They're not poisonous.
But they still bite you?
Yeah, they can still bite.
Okay.
And then... this little short story predates both of those. Late at night, my wife decides to step off the deck. And I was always saying, always have a flashlight, always wear shoes. And when you know it, she was barefoot without a flashlight, and she steps on a snake. She's bitten, and all I see is the very tail end of the snake because, you know...
So you don't know what it is?
Well, I'm 90% certain I know what it is. So we're racing off to the emergency room at the University Hospital in an old Pinto. Parts are falling off it as we're speeding along at 80 miles an hour. We get there, we walk in, they immediately look at her, and the doctor says, "Well, how long has it been since she's been bitten?" Well, it was probably about a half an hour. And he goes, "Well, if she hasn't had a reaction, she's not going to have one." Well, they had 3 people hospitalized with copperhead bites. It seemed to be the year for copperhead bites, and 2 of them, they were worried about amputation because they couldn't control the swelling. Well, we went home. The next day, we looked at the arch of her foot. She has small feet with a very high arch, and the snake had sunk its bottom fangs into the arch of her foot, and the top fangs, which contained the poison, did hit, but then they slid down and they left 2 scratch marks.
Okay. All right. Now, you got a poem on snakes, on catching a rattlesnake. We only got 3 minutes here, so you want to get into this. He caught a rattlesnake.
I caught a rattlesnake.
All right, and we're going to show you a picture of this rattlesnake while you're reading this poem.
Okay. This is called Snake Music. The first time I caught a rattlesnake, scales the size of dirty pennies, I used a sponge mop to hold it down. I quickly grabbed behind its flat head, pits swollen with poison. It quickly coiled its thick body tight around my forearm and began to twist. I couldn't stop it from breaking free. Jerking my arm back and jumping, I dropped the snake to the ground. On the second try, pressing a forked stick down into the dirt behind its head, I placed my boot on its tail and picked it up from both ends. In a terrarium, it learned to attack the camera lens that was daily turned on it. Released after a week, it went directly toward the lens and the man running away with the camera. A friend mentions that decades ago her mother raced out the back door of their home in the red dirt plains of Oklahoma with a shovel to beat a 6-foot-long diamondback to death. Through the F-hole of her violin, her father inserted the severed rattle, talisman to shake awake her virtuosity. It never did. Still, she searches corners for a coiled violin. Just yesterday, sitting on the porch, the oaks and buckbrush more green than anyone can remember for August, as if summer was permanently planted in these fields and trees, the forest filled with the locust's incessant chorus, I began to wonder why their song wasn't rising and falling. I saw 3 cats staring into the center of the triangle they formed. Other times I thought that bees were swarming before I noticed the cats. I went to the shed, retrieved a 5-gallon plastic bucket but couldn't find the lid, so brought a slightly smaller second bucket, a long-handled shovel, and leather gloves. The cats backed away as I placed the open end of the bucket over the timber rattler. It struck twice before its rattle slipped under the bucket's lip. Sliding a piece of rusty sheet metal underneath the rim, I flipped it over and placed the second bucket into the first, sealing the snake inside. It was the sound of a rainstick, but more a downpour than a gentle breeze. Driving far into the wildlife refuge, the unbroken warning flooded the car. Another friend tells me that rattlesnake poison is a cocktail of neuro and hemotoxins depending on where they live. The bucket turned over, the snake again coils, continues to rattle as I coax it off the gravel road into the weeds so it won't be run over.
And that's a true story.
Yes, the very first rattlesnake I caught it barehanded. Once was enough though. I was not, I did not need to do that again. But the bucket technique with the cats is really a pretty safe way to do it.
Good luck to you. You won't find me doing that. Our first Poet Laureate of Missouri.
Snake handler.
Snake handler. Well, Walter Bargen, thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for sharing that original piece with us today.
Well, I have many more snake stories.
Come back again, okay?
Okay,
We'll get you to come back again.
Okay.
Walter Bargen, it's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, nutrition and dietitian and the League of Women Voters. Our program directed by Travis McMillan, Reynolds Journalism Institute, audio Pat Akers, KBIA, our floor director Kevin Cassins, and our assistant producer and guest coordinator Uncle James Mauser. Have yourself a pleasant morning, a great afternoon, and a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. Bye-bye.